Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing a video talking to you about this little fun guy here. This is the Beretta ARX100. Now, no doubt some of you will have heard of this, but the vast majority of you probably are not super familiar with this guy. It's something that I have had as the object of my affection for years and years and years. Now I have one, I've put a lot of rounds through it, and I'm going to be sharing my experience with you guys. Now, part of what made me able to put so many rounds through it is I did have the support of PMC ammo. They did provide me with about 1,000 rounds of ammo to put through this. I've supplemented that with nearly 1,000 of my own, so we are close to 2,000 rounds through this guy. But I do want to say thanks to PMC for helping to make that happen. Without their contribution, especially in today's ammo market, this would have taken a lot longer to get a review done of. So touch more on PMC ammo later on in the video, but I wanted to say thanks to them right out the gate. So with that out of the way, let's cut in some footage with this thing, and then we'll dig deeper into what this is. So the Beretta ARX100 is something that was developed by Beretta to compete as one of the new weapon systems to be adopted by different military forces around the world. It has seen some adoption, not here in the United States, but in other parts of the world. Seems to have met some mixed success over there, as you might imagine, given that, again, a lot of you probably haven't seen this before. However, it is one of the most interesting rifles that I am familiar with. It has a lot of features that make it a really neat option for those who are especially left-handed. However, it does have some glaring faults that I think is what prevented it from being adopted any further. But I also feel like stuff that would be pretty easy to fix in, say, a Generation 2, that would make this a much, much more viable option. Now, my relationship with this thing goes back quite a while. Like many of you who are familiar with this, your probably first exposure to it was a video done by Nut and Fancy at SHOT Show, where he went to the Beretta booth, talked about a lot of the different firearms they had at the time, and then they ended the video by kind of showing this off. And for, again, a lot of people, myself included, that was their first introduction to the idea of the Beretta ARX. Now, at that time, it was the Beretta ARX160, and the military version is still called the 160 in the United States. The 160 is what was imported first, which was the 22 long rifle version, and then the full intermediate cartridge 5.56 version is the ARX100. But again, after seeing that video where they were talking about this thing with Nut and Fancy, I knew I had to have one. However, years and years and years went by. They were not coming into the country. They had promised certain things about what this thing would be like when it did come into the country, and especially a price point of well under $2,000. However, none of that really came true. They came in pretty expensive, and because of some of the features of it, they were a big commercial flop, and no one wanted them. So I was actually able to pick up one of these for fairly cheap. And I got this one used, I guess I should say, right out the gate from Muzzle Sporting Goods, where I happen to work. And I've just had a really good time with it, but I also recognize some of its drawbacks. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the features of this rifle, which this is, I should point out, a registered short-barreled rifle. I did do a Form 1 on this guy, so this currently has its 10 1/4 inch barrel. So let's go ahead and dig into it. Now, as I just said before that break, this is a 10.25-inch barrel. This thing is available in 2 different length variations, at least to the civilian market. There might be some other options out there in the military market or law enforcement market, but at least what was available to us civilians, it was this 10.25-inch 5.56 barrel and then a 16-inch barrel. Now, one of the coolest things about this barrel, and I think is one of the things that made everyone super interested in it, is how fast and easy it is to change the barrel on this. So I'm going to lock the bolt open on the empty mag here, and I'm going to use that to help keep it open during this process. I have 2 takedown tabs here on either side of the receiver, and very similar to a Glock slide, all I have to do is pull down on those 2 tabs. I'm going to break it out here, and then you just pull the barrel straight out. So with that done, I can then take like the 16-inch barrel and then drop it in, and now I have a 16-inch rifle. Now, probably the majority of the shooting that I did with this thing was with the 16-inch barrel in it. However, obviously recently, really once getting my Form 1 approved, it's been predominantly with the short barrel, and it's just a real simple process of swapping back and forth. So I can just, again, take my short barrel, drop it in, and click in, and we're good to go. Now, you're no doubt going to wonder what kind of return to zero you can expect with something like that. I haven't done a whole lot of long distance shooting with this. I did take a class where I was shooting out to some extended ranges, but suffice to say, in the ranges that I am expecting to use something like this, I haven't noticed an appreciable point of impact shift. If I was actually shooting out to 200-300 yards, I might notice something, but again, from my experience, I haven't had any issues. Now, before I move off the front of the barrel here, I should mention, you'll see an A2 bird cage on the front here. That's how both barrels are going to come from the factory. You can tell I already swapped out to a suppressor device on the 16-inch barrel, but I still have kept the A2 on this one, and I've actually tried multiple muzzle devices with this gun, and really just found my way back to the A2 after some time. It's just really well suited for this thing. It does a good job of flash suppression on such a short barrel. And I found most muzzle brakes, especially in compensators, to overdrive the gun down. So it was actually, instead of recoiling up, it was recoiling down, and I had to bring the rifle back up to get it back on target, which was kind of funky. It is also worth mentioning, I had to have a gunsmith remove the muzzle device here. I, for the life of me, could not loosen the muzzle device from the factory, to the point where I actually contacted Beretta's customer service and said, is there something I'm missing here? Is there a thread locker? Is there a reverse thread? Because this thing is not coming loose, and it had to actually be cut off by my gunsmith at the McCluskey Arms Company. So kind of crazy there. I did try running this thing suppressed, but as we'll get to here next, it didn't work so well, and that is because of our adjustable gas settings here. Now, this is a gas piston gun. It is a short stroke gas piston. However, I only have 2 settings. I have normal and I have adverse. Adverse being for if this thing gets really, really filthy and it's not getting enough gas pressure, I can actually open it up again and then get extra gas coming through the system to help it cycle more reliably. But there being no suppressed setting, this thing just was really, really overgassed. The velocity was way too fast and I couldn't get it to reliably cycle. So I just stuck the A2 bird cage back on here, again, after trying a couple other brakes, and it's been working fine ever since. So I really wish that that thing had an adjustable system. Moving back, we have a entirely polymer chassis for this gun, which makes it super, super lightweight. Now I have added a light up here, which I'll probably take off given, again, the usage of this thing mostly being a range toy now. But you do have plenty of real estate for attaching stuff. I have tried this thing with infrared lasers and everything else like that, but not being able to run this thing suppressed kind of makes it not super usable for nighttime stuff, in my opinion. You have an entire Picatinny rail all across the top here that is all one piece. So you have a lot of options for optics mounting. Ordinarily, this would come with some iron sights. However, they are probably the worst iron sights that I've ever used on any modern firearm. First of all, they sit really tall, so you already have a really tall height over your cheek riser here. So I really get a chin weld just with a standard AR optic. The iron sights actually sit higher than your standard AR-15 offset, so you can't co-witness with most modern optics. They're really kind of flimsy feeling, and they would also slide back and forth on the rail. So not super encouraging. I just went ahead, pulled them off entirely. I might put some other, aftermarket like Magpul sights on it. But again, for what this thing is, I think it's working just fine with this SIG red dot here on top. One of the issues that people ran into with these right out the gate is because this is a metal rail attached to a polymer receiver, there was some flex going on. You could actually grab your optic and you could kind of flex it on top of the chassis. So they actually added roll pins back here under the rail to help stabilize that out. If you've seen Military Arms Channel has done a video comparing the accuracy before and after that modification. Didn't seem to make much of a difference, but it made people feel good. It made them feel more confident, and I guess that's all that matters. Now, one of the drawbacks about this thing that I think could very easily be improved on is the side rails on this guy. I'm going to flip this over so you can probably see it better. I have full Picatinny rail on the 3 and 9 o'clock positions, and it just kind of sits out uncomfortably far from the gun. Picatinny rail is pretty limiting these days, and for most people's purposes, they would much rather have something like M-Lock. Honestly, I'd rather even have key mod than these things here. And I think this is just a symptom of it being designed too early. Had this thing come out 3 or 4 years later, that probably would have been fixed. I think it would have been a much more usable gun as well. Down here on the factory civilian guns, you typically have just a smooth section of polymer here that covers up a grenade launcher mount. As a civilian, I'm unfortunately unable to purchase one of those grenade launchers, so it is entirely pointless for them to import the guns with that feature, and it's just taking up extra space, which is already making this front of the gun super thick. I will say dummy thick up here in front. The rail makes it at least a little bit more usable. As I ND my light there, I can at least put vertical grips or something on there if I wanted to. But just little things like that, if you're going to be making it for the civilian market, why would you include things that are unusable and waste space that I could otherwise use for things I can actually get my hands on realistically? So little gripe there. I have put a BCM vertical grip on it. Again, being an SBR, I can do that without having to worry about it, and everything is working well. Now, as we move back, you can probably see some sling mounts here. This is one of the other issues with this thing. It has probably the worst sling mounting options of any modern rifle, especially military rifle, that I have come across. You have these little tiny metal inserts in the polymer that you can attach a rail to. You have them on both sides, up in front and aft of the ejection port, and then you have it here on the stock. However, it's way too thin for pretty much any sling out there. Now, I have found that the Faro Concepts Slingster actually works really well, but if you're using an 1.25" sling like a Blue Force Gear or a Magpul sling, it is not going to work. I have tried using the Blue Force Gear like little adapter things, and it just makes it way too unwieldy. It's just really not well suited for that. This is a much more elegant attachment method now, using an appropriately sized sling, but it's still in a really awkward location. Part of the reason they did that is because the stock does fold, as we'll get to in a second, but just the sling mounting really sucks. Hence why I kind of have a vestigial Magpul RSA mount up there in case I run a QD sling. Probably touch on that later. Now, moving back to the magazine well, this is designed to work with standard Stanag magazines. This is a steel magazine that is included with it. It's a hefty mag, which is pretty nice if you're trying to do quick mag changes because it is heavy enough to kind of fall out. Very reminiscent of like an HK416 magazine with that heavy steel construction. However, this is not compatible with all AR-15 magazines. So again, works with your standard STANAG, aluminum, or steel magazines. Works with Lancer mags, Gen 2P mags, but not Gen 3P mags or any drum that I am familiar with. So I've tried, inserting Gen 3P mags, but because of the over travel stop on the spine of the magazine, it prevents it from fully seating and locking in. So you really have to be cognizant of what magazines you're trying to use with this. Again, standard STANAG mags work just fine, but some of the oversized mags that eliminate potential issues that you may or may not run into are not going to work with this guy. I'm going to go ahead and leave that out so we can talk a little bit about the controls here. Now, this is where things actually get really nice because this is one of the most ambidextrous firearms that I have ever come across. So I have here right in front of the trigger guard a little up and down lever that is on both sides. So if I needed to lock the bolt open, I can pull the bolt to the rear, push up on that tab, and then it locks the bolt open. I can also drop the bolt that way by pushing down there, and that can make for very, very fast mag changes. I was taking a class where the instructor was timing mag changes, basically doing 1R1s, and this was by far the fastest in the class. I'm gonna give the gun some credit for that as opposed to my own ability, but they go in coordination there. One cool thing, if I pull the bolt to the rear here and pull it out at a certain takedown spot, it'll kind of lock open. I can then push the charging handle through the upper receiver to the other side, push that back in, and now I have a right hand charging handle. So if I am shooting left-handed, that might work better. If I'm just used to AK manipulations, I can do that as well. Now they do make an oversized bolt knob that you can get for this thing in case you wanted to make it a little bit easier to grab onto, because it is kind of necessarily pretty small to be able to make it through the upper receiver. However, if you are using that oversized bolt knob, you can no longer actually swap it from one side to the other. I'll just give it a couple smacks here. It always seems to stick on this side, not sure why. Now with the magazine release, we have it just above that bolt catch on either side. So again, whether you're shooting right-handed or left-handed, it's right there. Same place it would be for an AR-15, so very intuitive there as well. And you also have a 90-degree safety lever here, which as I move it on this side, you can see it moving on that side. And again, completely ambidextrous. However, this takes it one step further because you can get AR-15 lowers that'll let you work it left-handed or right-handed. What this thing will also do is it will eject to one side or the other, which is a really, really cool thing. How practical is it? I don't know, but it's also a very fast and easy switch. You just take a bullet tip. There's a little hole back here at the back of the receiver, just in front of where the charging hand or where the stock folds, and you just push it on the tip of a button in the direction you want it to eject to, or from this side if you want it to eject to the right, and it works great. Now I will also say that regardless of what hand you are, the ejection pattern is very, very much forward. So it isn't a huge deal if you are right-handed or left-handed to adjust the ejection pattern because it's probably not going to hit you anyway, which is a good thing. And then moving back, we have our stock here. It does only fold to the one side, but you have your little button here that you can depress and it locks in closed. You can have the stock in whatever position you want it to, and then it's just basically a friction lock to get it to open back up. And then once it is there, it is very solid. You have a little bit of adjustment here. One thing they were talking about doing was making extensions for this so that us larger Americans can get it to work a little bit better. To my knowledge, that's one of the other things that never came to fruition with this guy. And then also pistol grip, you are stuck with an A2 style pistol grip. It does have a storage compartment, which is nice. So in this case, I have my Form 1 in there. So that's cool, but you are stuck with what you got there. It's been working well enough for me. And then last but not least, I want to talk about the trigger. So the trigger is one of the very big drawbacks that most people are going to have with this guy. If I try it out here, it is a very short travel, but is a very heavy trigger. In fact, a lot of the people that I have try it out assume that the safety is on. because there's no travel. It's basically like a single stage trigger. You start applying pressure and it doesn't move, but the pressure just stacks and stacks and stacks. And they just assume that the safety must be on because it's not moving, and they're applying a lot of pressure. But again, it's a very short travel. It is fairly crisp. It's just very heavy, and the reset is very short. And I can say that I have made some hits out to some pretty significant distances out with this thing. So like I'll talk about later in the class, I was shooting out to like 175, 200 yards with it, and it was working just fine. So I guess do with that information what you will. There is a guy who makes a aftermarket trigger for this that's supposed to drop it down like over half, but it's like 250 bucks, which I thought was a lot until I considered that that's what a good Geisley trigger costs. So I guess it's fairly reasonable. It's just hard to swallow that amount of money with everything else going on this guy. So let's go ahead, cut in some more shooting footage, and then I'll talk about what my overall experience has been with this and what my overall thoughts are on it. So like I said at the beginning of the video, I did get this thing in the full 16-inch configuration. I had intentions to SBR it, but not anytime soon, because I saw that the replacement barrels were like 600 bucks. This has kind of the same thing as like a Scar, where the gas system and everything is all integrated into the barrel, so you can't just buy a barrel like an AR-15. So I was like, that's a lot of money that I'm going to be sinking into this, plus the $200 tax stamp. I'll probably just leave it as is. However, I had a follower reach out to me, said, hey, I've got an extra barrel sitting around. I'm not going to use it. Do you want to buy it at a offer that I couldn't refuse? So obviously I didn't refuse it. I picked it up, filed my Form 1, and then once that was approved, the two met for the first time, and it was a match made in heaven. I think this thing just really, really shines as a short barrel. However, I just wish that there were more barrel options, because this would be an awesome length for like a 300 blackout, or being able to convert my gun from 5.56 to 300 blackout quickly would be awesome. However, because this thing was a commercial flop, that will probably never ever happen. Just something I've come to terms with, I guess. But it would be cool if that was an option, but it is not. So I've been shooting this thing a lot just like this. However, one of the things that I wanted to do with this prior to doing a review was actually run this thing through a class, and I did that quite a while ago now with Northwest Self-Defense Education. I took their terrain-based tactical carbine class, which was probably the coolest course of fire I've ever done in any class. And like I said earlier in the video, I was shooting out to just over 200 yards, I think, on various sized steels at different angles and from different positions. And I'm not going to say I was making first round hits, but with a worse red dot than this, I was able to consistently hit targets that not everyone else was, even with an AR-15 with a much better trigger. Again, a lot of it's going to come down to your training and your ability to run your gun. So it is definitely usable and can easily make hits out to those distances. Now, one of the other things that I have kind of run into, as I alluded again earlier to, is running this thing suppressed. This thing does seem to prefer running with a flow-through suppressor. So like when I was testing out the OSS 5.56 can, I ran it on, I believe it was still the 16-inch version at that point in time. And it seemed to run a lot better, got a lot less gas in the face than just running a standard suppressor like my Turbo K. So if you do have plans to suppress one of these in OSS or some other flow-through style can, like the CGS Helios is going to be a much better option for you. So keep that in mind if you want to do that. But I've just really enjoyed shooting this thing. It is very, very fast to do your manipulations, doing mag changes, doing everything else, locking the bolt open. It's been exceptional. It has been extremely reliable as well. Through, again, almost 2,000 rounds now. Really the only malfunctions I've experienced are from the overpressurization of running a suppressor on it. So that is something that I can just totally accept, again, for my ideas of using this thing. Would it be cool if I could run this thing suppressed and actually use this as a primary fighting rifle? Maybe. But because of what this thing is, I don't think that that's a realistic thing to expect of it. And I think for a lot of people too, that it's just a really cool thing that's just not an AR. Shoots AR mags, shoots AR ammo, can take AR optics, but it's not an AR. And I think some people are just, I don't want to say tired of ARs, but you get bored of them. You want to try something different, and this is definitely something different. Now, the question is, should you get one? The question is, can you find one? Back when I first got this, you could actually get factory SBRs, more or less in this configuration, for $8.99 from places like Botash. At $8.99, I would say 100% this is worth owning. However, currently they are much, much harder to find. The whole market has just kind of lost their mind. That being said, if you're into it and you like something different, it's not a bad thing to have in your collection. It's a really cool thing. I think it's going to be one of the forgotten weapons because of how much of a commercial flop it was here in the United States. But it does have a military pedigree and is being used in various places around the world, which, you know, is nothing to sniff at. So if you can find one and you can swallow the price tag, it's definitely something I think that is a cool thing to have and a good thing to have. So I guess to wrap things up, I want to say thanks again to PMC Ammunition. I've been using their ammo for years and years and years, pretty much my entire shooting life. I've gone through many, many thousands of rounds prior to them sending me any ammo, and I've never had any ammo related issues with that ammo. And again, this thing swallowed down their ammo, no problem whatsoever. If you can find any ammo right now, you should get it. But if you can find PMC ammo specifically, you should definitely not hesitate to pick that stuff up. It's just been a really good ammo for me throughout the years. And again, they helped me provide this review for you guys. Now, that being said, I did, again, run a lot of my own ammunition through this thing. I did run it through classes, and a lot of that comes from the support I get over on Patreon. Because of that, I do post my content over there early. We do some exclusive content, some behind the scenes stuff. I post my talking points for upcoming videos so they can get an idea of what's coming. We just have a lot more direct interaction over there. So if that's something that interests you, or you just want to be financially supportive of the channel, definitely check that out. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. But anyway, with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.